Little House on the Prairie wasn't just a show, it was a piece of American soul. Through laughter, loss, and love, the Ingalls family became our own. But behind the gentle charm of Walnut Grove were real-life struggles the cameras never showed. Some stars carried silent pain. Others faced addiction, illness, or heartbreak after the final credits rolled. Now we revisit their lives not just to remember, but to reveal the truth behind the legacy. Let's begin. Michael Landon as Charles Ingalls. Michael Landon was born Eugene Maurice Orowitz on October 31, 1936, in Forest Hills, Queens, New York. To the world, he was Charles Ingalls, the ideal father, strong, kind, wise, and fiercely loving. But behind that wholesome image was a man haunted by scars few ever saw. When Landon joined Little House on the Prairie in 1974, he was 37 years old, already famous for Bonanza and determined to create a show that would heal his own wounds. And perhaps in healing himself, he'd heal others too. Because behind the camera, Michael wasn't just the lead actor. He wrote, directed, produced, and carried the emotional soul of the entire series on his shoulders. But that weight came from somewhere deep. As a child, Michael's home life was far from the peaceful Prairie. His mother struggled with mental illness and once attempted suicide in front of him. It was a trauma that would echo throughout his life. Landon battled severe anxiety, bedwetting, and chronic self-doubt issues he later confessed drove him to become obsessed with success and control. He found fame, yes, but paid for it with exhaustion. While filming Little House, he often worked 16-hour days trying to maintain a perfect image while quietly dealing with marital problems and substance use. He divorced twice the second time, scandalously after an affair with a makeup artist half his age. The tabloids feasted. Landon remained stoic. Despite his charisma and smile, co-stars later revealed that Michael could be controlling and emotionally distant on set. He pushed others hard, but no one harder than himself. Deep down, he was still that frightened boy trying to protect everyone, including himself, from chaos. In 1991, just months after wrapping his final TV film, Michael announced he had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was terminal. He fought it with the same energy that made him a star, but the disease was unforgiving. Michael Landon died on July 1, 1991, at his Malibu home surrounded by family. He was only 54 years old. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $40 million, including real estate in California and residuals from decades of television work. But his most lasting wealth was something deeper, the love of millions who saw him not as an actor, but as a father figure, a storyteller, and a reminder that strength often hides behind the most fragile souls. Catherine McGregor as Harriet Olsen. Catherine Scotty McGregor was born Dorley Dean McGregor on January 12, 1925, in Glendale, California. To millions of viewers, she was Harriet Olsen, the sharp-tongued, status-obsessed, hilariously villainous shopkeeper of Walnut Grove. But off-screen, Catherine couldn't have been more different. When she first joined Little House on the Prairie in 1974 at the age of 49, she brought with her decades of stage experience, a razor-sharp wit, and a deep understanding of complex characters. Harriet wasn't just a one-dimensional antagonist. Thanks to Catherine, she became a comedic force of nature. Her dramatic eye rolls, lavish hats, and biting sarcasm turned her into one of TV's most unforgettable bad moms. But behind the scenes, Catherine was nothing like the snobbish character she played. A deeply spiritual woman, she battled alcoholism in her younger years, a struggle that nearly cost her career. She eventually found sobriety and a new path through Hinduism, which she embraced with fierce devotion. She never married, never had children, and lived much of her later life in quiet solitude far from the Hollywood spotlight. While her co-stars often enjoyed fame and media attention, Catherine avoided it completely. She didn't appear in the Little House TV movie reunions, not out of bitterness, but because she was on a spiritual retreat in India. For her, peace meant more than publicity. Despite her prickly on-screen persona, fellow cast members described her as warm, kind, and generous, always showing up with baked goods, always eager to give a laugh, but rarely opening up about her personal pain. Catherine McGregor passed away on November 13, 2018 in Los Angeles at the age of 93. Her death went largely unnoticed by the mainstream press, no red carpets, no tributes. But for fans of Little House, it marked the end of an era. Richard Bull as Nells Olison. Richard Bull was born on June 26, 1924 in Zion, Illinois. For 9 seasons on Little House on the Prairie, he played Nells Olison, the soft-spoken shopkeeper and long-suffering husband of the outrageous Harriet Olsen. With every side-eyed deadpan remark and subtle sigh, Richard turned Nells into a quiet hero, the man who said little but meant everything. But Richard Bull was far more than just Harriet's husband. In fact, his life and career reflected the kind of slow-burning success that only comes with patience, discipline, and quiet strength. He got his start on stage and later moved into television, appearing in classics like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and Peyton Place. Never flashy, never scandalous. Richard was the kind of actor directors trusted. Dependable, humble, the glue that held chaotic sets together. By the time he joined Little House in 1974, he was already 50 years old, and his chemistry with Catherine McGregor Harriet became one of the show's greatest comedic duos. But unlike their love-hate marriage on screen, the two were great friends off-screen, often joking and rehearsing together long after filming had wrapped. Richard was married to actress Barbara Collentine for over 65 years, one of the rare Hollywood love stories that stood the test of time. The couple lived modestly in the Chicago area for much of their lives, far from the Hollywood flashbulbs. Friends often described him as the kindest man you could ever meet, with no ego, no drama, just genuine warmth. In his later years, Richard quietly stepped away from acting, preferring theater and occasional guest roles. He lived a life free of scandal, fame chasing, or fanfare. And maybe that's what made him so powerful on screen. He brought real peace to a world that often felt chaotic. Richard Bull passed away on February 3, 2014 at the age of 89 in Calabasas, California. His cause of death was pneumonia. At the time, he left behind a modest estate estimated at under $1 million, but his true legacy wasn't in money or headlines. It was in every knowing glance, every perfectly timed line, and every quiet moment he gave to a show filled with so much noise. Kevin Hagen as Dr. Hiram Baker. Kevin Hagen was born on April 3, 1928, in Chicago, Illinois. To millions of Little House on the Prairie fans, he was Dr. Hiram Baker, Walnut Grove's kind, bearded physician who healed everything from broken bones to broken hearts. Calm, gentle, and wise, Dr. Baker was the man the town trusted when life got hard. But in real life, Kevin Hagen's journey was anything but easy. Raised by a single mother after his father abandoned the family, Kevin faced hardship early. He served in the U.S. Navy during World War II and later earned a law degree, but the courtroom never felt like home. It wasn't until his late 20s that he decided to chase something riskier, acting, and it paid off. Before Little House, Kevin appeared in more than 120 television shows, from Gunsmoke to Perry Mason, usually playing outlaws or villains. Ironically, it was Little House where he played perhaps the kindest man on screen that finally let him show his true depth. Starting in 1974 at the age of 46, Kevin portrayed Dr. Baker with such sincerity that fans genuinely believed he was a doctor. Off-screen, Kevin was known for his humor and warmth. Cast members recalled him always cracking jokes between scenes, bringing levity to even the most emotional episodes. But life behind the camera had its shadows. Kevin's first marriage ended in divorce, and he later raised his son Christopher largely on his own. Financially, he never reached the heights of Hollywood fame. Despite decades in the industry, he lived modestly, relying mostly on residuals from Little House and convention appearances later in life. In the 2000s, Kevin was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. As the illness progressed, he withdrew from public appearances, choosing to spend his final days in Oregon with his son by his side. Still, he remained proud of his work, especially Little House, which he called the only show I ever did that made a difference in people's lives. Kevin Hagen passed away on July 9, 2005 at the age of 77. He left behind a modest estate, but what he gave to the world can't be measured in dollars. He was the face of compassion in a fictional town that felt more real than most cities, a healer in fiction, and a quiet warrior in life. Dabbs Greer, as Reverend Robert Alden. Dabbs Greer was born on April 2, 1917, in Fairview, Missouri. With his warm voice and gentle presence, he became the spiritual anchor of Little House on the Prairie as Reverend Robert Alden, the town's ever-present pastor, always ready with a sermon, a prayer, or simply a kind word. But few viewers knew that behind that soft-spoken figure was one of the most prolific and overlooked character actors in American television history. Greer's acting career began in the 1930s, and he never stopped working. Over the course of 6 decades, he appeared in more than 300 roles: The Twilight Zone, Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, Perry Mason Bonanza, The Andy Griffith Show, you name it, he was there. But not in the spotlight, always in the corner, always humble. When he joined Little House in 1974 at the age of 57, he was already a veteran of Hollywood. But Reverend Alden wasn't just another role. It was a part that allowed him to embody grace, faith, and quiet strength qualities he held dear in his own life. Co-stars described Dabbs as one of the kindest men on set, never demanding, never self-important. He often stayed late just to help the crew set up and quietly mentored younger actors like Melissa Gilbert behind the scenes. Though he remained unmarried and had no children, Dabbs was never lonely. He surrounded himself with books, music, and friends from every walk of life. He lived modestly, without scandal, and devoted himself to the craft of storytelling. In 1999, at the age of 82, he gave one final unforgettable performance playing the older version of Tom Hanks's character in The Green Mile. His brief role in that film brought him a wave of renewed admiration, especially among younger audiences who hadn't grown up with Little House. But shortly after, his health began to decline. Dabbs suffered from heart and kidney failure in his final years. In April 2007, just days after his 90th birthday, he passed away at Huntington Hospital in Pasadena, California. His estimated net worth was modest, under $1 million, but his legacy is beyond calculation. Dabbs Greer wasn't a star in the Hollywood sense. He was something better, a constant. A quiet, steady presence that made every show just a little more human. He taught us that strength can be soft, that faith can be quiet, and that sometimes the people who speak the least leave the deepest impact. Victor French, as Isaiah Edwards. Victor French was born on December 4, 1934, in Santa Barbara, California. With his towering frame, scruffy beard, and unforgettable laugh, he became one of Little House on the Prairie's most beloved characters. Mr. Isaiah Edwards, the wild, funny, fiercely loyal mountain man who became a second father to the Ingalls children. But in real life, Victor French was far more complex than the lovable frontiersman we saw on screen. He grew up in the shadows of Hollywood. His father, Ted French, was a stuntman, and from a young age, Victor was drawn to the world of acting. Yet he never chased stardom. He knew he wasn't the typical handsome leading man, and he didn't try to be. What he did become was one of the most emotionally honest actors of his generation. He first met Michael Landon while guest starring on Bonanza, and their connection was instant. Landon later said that Victor was the most loyal man he'd ever known. So when Landon created Little House, he wrote the role of Mr. Edwards specifically for Victor, a role that would define him. As Edwards, Victor was raw and human and alcoholic, trying to reform a friend with a broken past, a father figure with deep wounds. And it wasn't just acting. Much of Edwards' pain came from Victor's real life. He struggled with addiction, depression, and a sense of never quite belonging. Behind the jokes and charm, there was darkness. Victor was married only once, and it ended in divorce. He had 3 children, but the relationship with them was strained due to his demanding career and emotional distance. Co-stars described him as brilliant, intense, and sometimes volatile, but always real. Off-screen, he was also a director, helming over 20 episodes of Little House and several of Highway to Heaven. His work behind the camera was just as powerful, focused, emotional, and unflinching. In 1989, at just 54 years old, Victor was diagnosed with advanced lung cancer. The news hit Michael Landon hard. Landon, who had always seen Victor as his closest creative partner, was devastated. The two had planned more projects together, but time ran out. Victor French passed away on June 15, 1989, just 3 months after his diagnosis. His death left a huge void, not just in the Little House family, but in American television. He was laid to rest in Santa Barbara, his hometown far from the lights of Hollywood. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $1.5 million. But what he left behind wasn't about money. It was the memory of a man who played brokenness with dignity, who made pain funny, who made kindness cool. Merlin Olsen as Jonathan Garvey. Merlin Olsen was born on September 15, 1940 in Logan, Utah. Before he ever stepped onto the Prairie, he was already a legend, not of television, but of the football field. A Hall of Fame NFL player for the Los Angeles Rams, known as one of the fearsome foursome Olsen, was a beast on the field, and a soft-spoken poet off it. When he joined Little House on the Prairie in 1977 as Jonathan Garvey, he was 37 years old and stepping into a whole new arena acting. And yet, despite being a newcomer, Merlin quickly won the hearts of viewers. His portrayal of Garvey, the strong, dependable friend of Charles Ingalls, felt effortlessly real. Loyal, kind, but with a quiet grief beneath the surface. In many ways, Jonathan Garvey reflected Merlin himself. He was known among cast and crew as gentle, thoughtful, and incredibly humble. Melissa Gilbert once said, "He was a mountain of a man, but his soul was even bigger than his shoulders." Merlin had transitioned from athlete to actor with grace, and his career extended far beyond Little House. He starred in Father Murphy, created by Michael Landon, worked as a sportscaster for NBC, and became the face of numerous TV commercials. His deep, calming voice made him a go-to narrator, and his reputation was one of integrity, both in business and in art. But behind the scenes, he battled heartbreak. In 2009, Olsen was diagnosed with mesothelioma, an aggressive form of cancer caused by asbestos exposure. It was a shocking revelation, especially for someone who had lived a clean, athletic life. Even more devastating, Merlin believed the exposure happened decades earlier while working construction jobs during college. He filed a lawsuit against several companies, not for personal revenge, but to raise awareness for others. In true Merlin fashion, he faced the disease with quiet strength and relentless dignity. He passed away on March 11, 2010, at the age of 69, surrounded by his wife Susan and their 3 children. His net worth at the time was estimated at $4.5 million, built through careful investment and a steady career, but no amount of money could fill the void he left. Carl Swenson as Lars Hansen. Carl Swenson was born on July 23, 1908, in Brooklyn, New York. When he stepped into the role of Lars Hansen, the wise and soft-spoken founder of Walnut Grove, he wasn't just acting, he was that character. With his thick Scandinavian accent, weathered hands, and warm presence, Swenson gave life to the kind of man everyone wished was their neighbor or grandfather. He joined Little House on the Prairie in 1974, already 66 years old, a seasoned character actor with decades of film, radio, and television work under his belt. From Gunsmoke to Perry Mason, he had played everything from priests to villains. But it was Little House that allowed him to show the full depth of his warmth and wisdom. As Lars Hansen, he was the town's mill owner, its founder, and its moral compass. When trouble hit Walnut Grove, people didn't go to the sheriff, they went to Mr. Hansen. Off-screen, Carl was known for being humble, punctual, and endlessly devoted to his craft. He didn't chase fame, he chased honesty in performance. His colleagues described him as soft-spoken, deeply intellectual, and a man who treated acting not as a job, but as a calling. What makes Carl Swenson's story so haunting is that he passed away right as his character did too. In one of the most emotionally powerful episodes of Little House, titled "There's No Place Like Home Part 1, Lars Hansen suffers a stroke and dies, a storyline written because Swenson had already passed in real life. The episode aired on September 19, 1978, just 5 days after Carl Swenson died of a sudden heart attack on September 10, 1978, at the age of 70. It was as if the man and the role were destined to leave together. At the time of his death, Swenson's net worth was modest, likely under $1 million, but his impact was far greater than any fortune. His final performance became a eulogy not just for Lars Hansen, but for Carl himself. In that episode, Michael Landon is seen openly crying, and those weren't scripted tears. They were real. Swenson left behind his wife actress Joan Tompkins and a legacy of work built not on fame, but on truth. He died with his boots on in character doing what he loved most, and in that he gave Little House one of its most unforgettable and most human goodbyes. Hersha Parody as Alice Garvey. Hersha Parody was born on May 25, 1945 in Berea, Ohio. On Little House on the Prairie, she played Alice Garvey, the schoolteacher, devoted wife of Jonathan Garvey and loving mother, a role filled with compassion and strength. But what viewers remember most is how she left. Her final scene, trapped in the burning school for the blind, clutching a baby as flames closed in, is still considered one of the most shocking and emotional moments in television history. It wasn't just a character death. It was a gut punch, a loss that felt too real. And sadly, the tragedy didn't end there. Before her breakout as Alice Garvey in 1977, Hersha had taken on a smaller role on Little House, playing Charles Ingalls' sister-in-law, Eliza Ingalls, in a one-off episode. But when she returned as Alice, it was clear she was meant for more. Her chemistry with Merlin, Olsen, Jonathan Garvey was tender and believable, and fans grew attached quickly. Off-screen, Hersha was quiet, introspective, and deeply committed to her craft. But Hollywood didn't reward subtlety. After her character was written out in 1980, reportedly to boost ratings with a dramatic shock, Hersha never landed another major role again. She faded from the spotlight almost overnight. She continued doing small theater productions and guest appearances, but the phone didn't ring the way it used to. In interviews, she expressed no bitterness, only sadness. She said Alice Garvey died in that fire, and maybe part of me stayed there too. Her personal life was equally quiet. She was once in a long-term relationship with actor John Peveril, but never married. She had one son, Jonathan, who became her greatest joy in later years. As the decades passed, Hersha withdrew from the public eye, preferring privacy over fame. But life had one final heartbreak waiting. In the 2010s, Hersha was diagnosed with a brain tumor. As the illness progressed, it affected her speech, her memory, and her ability to care for herself. She spent her final months in a hospice care facility in Norfolk, Virginia, under the care of her son. On August 23, 2023, Hersha Parody passed away at the age of 78. Her net worth at the time was estimated at under $500,000, a stark reminder that even unforgettable TV moments don't always translate to lifelong security. Shannon Doherty as Jenny Wilder. Shannon Doherty first appeared on Little House on the Prairie in 1982 at just 11 years old, playing Jenny Wilder, a gentle, sweet child with eyes full of wonder and a heart searching for family after deep loss. It was her first major role, and though her time in Walnut Grove was short, she left a lasting impression. After leaving the Prairie, she stepped into the chaos of Beverly Hills 90210, where she became an overnight teen icon. Fame hit fast and hard. She was young, opinionated, and under a spotlight that never dimmed. The tabloids called her Hollywood's bad girl, but beneath the headlines was a woman trying to find her voice in an industry that rarely allowed women to be strong and flawed. In Charmed, she cast a new spell on audiences this time as a powerful witch fighting evil both on screen and off. Again, behind-the-scenes tensions followed her. Again, she was labeled difficult. But for her fans, she was magnetic, raw, honest, and real. Then came the biggest battle of all. In 2015, Shannon announced she had breast cancer. Instead of retreating, she let the world in. Through social media, she shared her surgeries, her chemo, her fears, and her hope. She became more than a celebrity. She became a symbol of courage. In 2020, she revealed the cancer had returned stage 4. Over the next 4 years, she faced it head-on, never once hiding. She continued acting, inspiring, speaking, and above all, living. On July 13, 2024, Shannon Doherty passed away at the age of 53. She died peacefully, surrounded by family and close friends. The world mourned not just the actress, but the warrior. She left behind a legacy that defied labels from Prairie Girl to Hollywood Rebel to cancer advocate. At the time of her passing, her net worth was estimated at $5 million. But the true wealth she left behind lived in the hearts of millions who saw themselves in her fight. Melissa Gilbert, as Laura Ingalls. Melissa Gilbert was only 9 years old when she became Laura Ingalls, the barefoot girl with fire in her eyes and prairie dust on her skirt. From the very first episode of Little House on the Prairie, she wasn't just playing a role, she was Laura. For an entire generation, she became the heart of Walnut Grove and the symbol of youthful hope in a hard world. But while Laura was growing up in a cabin on screen, Melissa was growing up on a soundstage surrounded by cameras, makeup chairs, and the sometimes cruel machinery of Hollywood. Adopted as an infant into an entertainment family, Melissa was thrust into the spotlight early. Little House brought her fame, love from millions, and a lifelong connection with Michael Landon, whom she saw as a second father. But his death in 1991 left her deeply shaken. She once said, losing him felt like losing her compass. Behind the fame, Melissa wrestled with insecurity, anxiety, and the crushing weight of perfection. As she grew older, the cute Prairie Girl image followed her but didn't always fit the woman she was becoming. Her relationships were rocky, including a high-profile marriage to actor Bruce Boxleitner that ended after 16 years. She struggled with addiction, particularly alcohol, and spent years in therapy rebuilding herself. But like Laura, Melissa was a fighter. She eventually wrote 2 best-selling memoirs, Prairie Tale and Back to the Prairie, in which she openly shared her highs and heartbreaks. She didn't sugarcoat. She didn't pretend. She laid it all bare. The anxiety, the failed surgeries, the toxic fame, the healing. In 2013, she married actor Timothy Busfield and moved away from Hollywood both literally and spiritually. They settled in a small cottage in upstate New York, far from red carpets and paparazzi. She grew vegetables, raised chickens, and even ran for president of the Screen Actors Guild. As of 2025, Melissa Gilbert is 61 years old and thriving, not in the spotlight, but in peace. Her net worth is estimated at $1 to $2 million, a modest figure by celebrity standards, but she's rich in something more important: self-awareness, wisdom, and purpose. The Prairie may have faded, but their stories still echo in every tear, every smile, every lesson they left behind. If these memories touched your heart, don't let them disappear. Like, share, and subscribe to keep their legacy alive, one story at a time.